So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on today's panel. The panel is called Real, Raw and Unplugged, and we're going to be talking about living out our daily faith on a daily basis. So could I invite everyone to just give a short introduction about yourselves and a fun fact about yourselves as well. Sorry, I should have said that beforehand.
My fun fact is my name's not Paul, it's David. It's kind of bizarre. I work in a secondary school, and when I'm not working in the school, I work for the SQA often as well. And when I go off and mark and I do various things, they all call me John. And that's been an ongoing thing for about 20 years, so I don't know what it is about me. People, anyway, so my name's David Berry. I'm a secondary school teacher. I work in a school called Paisley Grammar School out in Paisley, which is just near Glasgow Airport. I've been there for about 18 years. I studied maths and business, went into work for a couple of years, decided God was calling me off to Bible college, so did 4 years at Bible college, did a theology degree, and at the end of that, I just felt a real strong sense that working in a school was where I would be best equipped. So I've been in there for, as I say, 18 years in Paisley. I worked in Larbert for about 10 years before that as well. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, my name's Sam, and a fun fact about me would be I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in a desert. And I work for a Dutch engineering firm as an environmental consultant. The main work that we do is involved in offshore renewables, getting permission from the government for our clients' offshore wind farms to stand up and be built. And I've been with the company there almost for 5 years now, and in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is home. And I serve in a local church in city centre of Edinburgh called Victory Hill. And yeah, that's me.
Wow, Middle East to Edinburgh. That is, because wow, it's a long place, isn't it?
Hi everyone, it's lovely to meet you. My name is Laura Young. My fun fact, I'll do a name one, is that in 2 weeks' time my name will be Laura Anderson, because I'm getting married, so
congratulations.
There we go. And yeah, I am an environmental scientist and campaigner. So I'm doing a PhD in climate resilience and community engagement funded by the Scottish Government. I'm in my final year of that, but I also do a lot of campaigning work, and I work freelance as a sort of environmental consultant on various different issues across waste, climate change, sustainability, and every day looks a little bit different. A lot of my work is online as well and social media, so a huge part of my work is digital.
Okay, so let's get kicked off. So all of you on this panel have a Christian faith. You are followers of Christ. And following Christ is not just a thing you do on Sundays, right? But for a lot of us, it can seem like that, especially at the start of our journeys. But when did you first realize that faith was meant for more than Sundays?
I can kick it off, and I think for me it was when I moved away from home to go to university. I was 17 just. I turned 18 during Freshers' Week, which is a very fun time to turn 18. But when I moved away, I grew up in a Christian home, so Sundays were about church. There was also other extracurricular things that you might do with youth clubs or whatever it might be. But as soon as I moved away, I learned that faith and Christianity was something that you had to opt into. So for me, it wasn't even a Sunday thing, because I thought that's no fun. I've got better things to do on my weekend. So I think for me, when I moved away and went outside of the Christian bubble, I realized that all faith is something you had to opt into, not just on a Sunday, but actually every single day. And so I think for me, that was, over 10 years ago. And I had a journey through uni, not going to church, going to Christian things, not going to Christian things. But that was definitely the time that I had to first think about it for myself.
Amazing. Sam?
So in a similar way to Laura, kind of realizing that it's more than just a Sunday thing. For me, it was kind of the people around me who really showed me that through the way that they showed up at work, My dad, he's a big inspiration to me in that area. He's a part of a government kind of body called Homes England, and is a part of the faith network at Homes England. So hearing all the stories that he would share. I've got another friend who is a lawyer down in London working for PwC, hearing about the amazing things that they do down there. And it's just inspiring hearing all of these kinds of things. For me, in Victory Hill, in the church that we go to, there's a brother called Lloyd Van Vuren. He's in Zimbabwe right now, but he put me in touch with Rosalind, who is here with Transform Work. Transform Work, and invited me along to one of the kind of webinars that they run, and just so encouraging hearing Edinburgh Napier University, Historic Environment Scotland, and just Christians from all these organizations around the country navigating these corporate spaces and setting up these prayer groups. And I just remember one guy, I can't remember what his name was, Rosalind would probably know, but he was like, just put a Bible on your desk. Just have a Bible on your desk and just keep it there. And I was like, oh, that's such an encouraging idea. So yeah, for me, realizing that it's more than just a Sunday thing, just through hearing people's kind of testimonies with it.
Yeah, I love that. Put a Bible in your desk. We're going to be talking about practical ways to do things, so that's definitely one.
So I grew up in this church, from a very young age, and I remember distinctly about age of about 12, deciding I didn't believe in God, wasn't interested, but I just kept on coming along. But all through that time, the messages you got from the preaching was always about churches. It's not just about Sunday, it's about the whole of your life. And I just heard that constantly. So when I became a Christian at the age of about 20, I don't think it was ever a time where I just thought it's just about Sunday. It was never really, for me, it's always been much more than that. Sunday's a moment of, coming together with people. You get energy on a Sunday and it's kind of a special time, but it's always about the world and being active. So can't really think of a time when that wasn't the case.
Okay, so we're going to talk about living boldly for Christ, and I want to put this question over to Sam first, because you kicked us off with worship. So what does being bold for Christ look like in your daily life?
It's challenging. I think a huge thing for me is a mindset shift. Shifting the mindset of everywhere I go, there is a God who is real, who is living inside of me, who wants to do something everywhere I go. So it's like a little mindset shift. And I think going into work, it completely changes your posture, how you're going into work, thinking, oh my goodness, like, God, you want me to do things at work today, more than just like what's in my calendar. And being aware of that when you're going to the coffee machine, when you're going to on lunch break, it completely changes your mindset. How many days you work from home, how many days you choose to go into the office, all of these kinds of decisions that we face in how we work, our work ethic. So for me, changing that perspective. And you see it in the Bible. I think linking that perspective shift to Scripture is a huge one as well. A huge way that helps inspire kind of bold living. And my favorite one that I wanted to share was just Jesus' parable of the hidden treasure in the field. And the field being just an everyday work environment for shepherds in that time who Jesus was speaking to. And they stumble across treasure in the field. As they're walking about their field, their workplace, they stumble across treasure. And it's, again, just little scripture that helps posture and change that mindset. So, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scripture where it says, set your minds on the things above. And, with everything going on and what we can see, it's really important to really think, okay, what we do for the kingdom in what we're doing right now. So thank you so much for that. This one is for you, Laura. So could you share a specific moment or a time when your faith influenced the decision that you made?
Yeah, there's lots. And one of the easy ways for me to talk about my faith in the work that I do is quite often, because it's environmental, because it branches into social justice, very commonly you get asked, why are you passionate about this? That's just a really common conversation that people ask you. Sometimes it's just in a working group around a table having a meeting. Other times it's when I'm speaking and I'm on a stage, but that is always a really great opportunity where I'm able to say, well, the reason I'm passionate about this world and all of the people that live in it is because I'm a Christian, I have a faith, and I can talk about it from that perspective. So that's a really great way that I'm able to share about it. But I think when my faith has pushed me in certain directions for doing my work is often how I actually go about doing it. In the environmental space, there's a lot of people driven by anger, by negativity, by frustration, which is all right, as in it's all feelings that we absolutely have. But then the outworkings of what they do can often be full of that as well. And so often I'm always asking God, how can I do this work, but in a way that is bringing about change in a positive way or in a challenging way, but in a challenging way that we can actually be fruitful in what we're doing. And so I'm always constantly trying to think, how can my faith lead me in the work that I do that is different, that comes across different. And so I think that's definitely a way. And there's lots of small examples. I'm quite often in rooms with whether it's business leaders or politicians, and that's always an opportunity for me to say, right, God, before I open my mouth and start ranting about something, what is the best way that I can communicate this message? And I think that's definitely something every day that I try and help my faith lead rather than just my own intuition.
Amazing. So we're talking about a load of great things here, but this panel is about being real and sharing our faith. We're not always going to get a response with open arms and everyone giving us hugs, are we? So this question is for you, David. Have you faced pushback because of your faith, and how have you navigated that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was looking at that question, thinking this is the hardest question of the three. So in my work, I'm a religious studies teacher and then philosophy with the older kids as well. The nature of the job, and why did I go into teaching? Because I felt a calling. I felt that I wanted to represent God in a school environment, and I wanted to be an RE teacher that would, not be maybe I don't know how to say this in case it undermine some of my colleagues, but when I grew up, the RE teachers were an interesting bunch, to put it mildly, and so I wanted to be in there and just kind of present religion in a positive way. But you can't evangelize if you're in the school. It would be completely wrong. You can't push faith. So you have to go in and you have to teach everything in a consistent and honest way. And I've done that as best as I can. There's all sorts of challenges working in schools because there's all sorts of initiatives that come that might not sit comfortably with a Christian worldview. I've never felt personally that I have struggled in the sense of, being under attack for being a Christian. In fact, the opposite has happened. So in my work, I'm often, people often make jokes and they say, you're the moral fibre. David Berry, you're the moral fibre of Paisley Grammar School. What do you think about this issue? And how do we resolve this, So that everybody knows I go to church. Everybody knows that I'm a Christian. And they don't have an issue with that at all. And in fact, 90% of the values that go on in a school, if not 95%, are essentially Christian values, concepts of respect, integrity, treating people, looking after the poor. If you listen to You listen to the head teacher, who's not religious, but if you listen to her talking about, we are here for those that can't speak for themselves, she might say. We did a prize giving the other night, and normally in a lot of schools in prize giving, it's the bright ones that step forward and they get the big prizes, and we do that as well. But she goes out of her way to make sure that the kids who have come from really disadvantaged backgrounds and they struggle academically, they're getting prizes and they're walking. Some of the best moments, and she said this at the end of the prize giving last week, I think the best moment was when, young such and such went forward and got their prize and all this. So it's Christian values absolutely everywhere in the school, and I think it's an absolute privilege being in a school and working with people who are really trying to do good for kids that often are struggling in the world. So I've never really felt that there's pushback against my faith. In fact, I remember someday there was a head teacher, just thinking about this morning, one of our head teachers sadly passed away very, very suddenly. The school was all shocked and we didn't know how to cope, and we didn't know how to deal with it with the kids. And after a while, the person that came in to kind of stand in for her said, let's get a service of some sort, and a reflective service. And they all looked at me, you'll know how to do this. I was, and so you were singing this morning, this Psalm 23, I will trust. And that was the reading. I picked that as the reading. And then some of the kids who are not religious were singing that song. And beautiful little thing. And, so there was no pushback in that. There was a sense of, we want to do something and you can contribute. And it wasn't an overtly evangelistic set, it wasn't, but it was just a nice opportunity to just pause and reflect and do it in a way that had Christian values in it. So, yeah.
That's very interesting, the moral fibre of the workplace. Love that one there. Laura, I want to also ask you this question as well. It's a similar question because, as you mentioned, the nature of your work can be emotionally charged. So how do you navigate your workplace? Have you faced pushback in that regard?
Yeah, and I feel I've got two workplaces. So with my PhD hat on, I sit in an office with other people, colleagues, even though we're all doing our own projects. And that is something so I'm about to go into my final year. So for 3 years, I've had the same desk, the same workplace, the same colleagues. And that can almost be a more difficult space to talk about faith because I'm like, I've got to see these people every single day. If I talk to them about something, I'm going to see them tomorrow, next week, and for the next few years. And so sometimes the challenge is knowing that this is not a one-off conversation. We may revisit this. And that can be something quite interesting because you have a relationship with these people. Being in a university, quite often the conversation over lunch are quite challenging. It's current affairs, it's things that are in the news, it's big topics. And so sometimes it's like, oh gosh, I need to say this with as much wisdom as possible because I'm going to see these people every single day and I want to have compassion and love. So that can be quite a tricky environment. That's actually the space that I find it most hard. Whereas with my other hat on, I do a lot of stuff with schools, workplaces, conferences, a lot of speaking. And a lot of these environments, you're probably never going to see these people again. And I was going to say throw a grenade in, and I need a better metaphor. But often you think, well, I can just talk about my faith because I will never be in this room again. And hopefully that's planting a good seed. But actually, as of tomorrow, I don't have to deal with this again. So I almost feel like in those situations I can be bolder because I've been invited in as a speaker or as someone to help them with the project, and they want to know what I've got to say. And so I find that almost easier to be bold. So I think it's interesting that there's certain workplace environments I find it really easy to talk about faith, and there's others that I find I do struggle. And I think that's where I'm, what Brian was talking about. I'm asking for, God's guidance and discernment in those tricky spaces. over the ones that are most difficult. But yeah, I don't think I've ever actually had, pushback. If anything, it's curiosity, and often the nervousness and anxiety, it's actually something I've put on myself. It's my own feelings about what I'm about to share. I don't think I've ever, openly had anyone, criticize me. Actually, people are curious. And I would say that, what we were hearing about this morning, especially young people, are so open to conversations about spirituality. Every day I'm getting asked by a friend or a colleague, someone. So I feel it's even easier. Actually, now it's more, I feel a few years ago I would be praying, God, give me the opportunities to talk about this. Whereas now I'm like, oh, right, okay, the opportunities are there. God, give me the words, while I'm in this situation to do it. And so that's the kind of interesting change I've seen just over time.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's interesting that you've noticed that in some areas you feel very bold and in other areas maybe not so much. And it's interesting to maybe hear if some other people have felt like that. So I'm really, really wanting to get onto audience questions, but let's just make this practical. I'm going to hand this one over to you, Sam. So what's one simple way that anyone here could live out their faith more intentionally when they get to work? Whether that's Monday. Think about this Monday.
I would kind of piggyback off of what I was previously talking about the posture shift and linking it back to the word. So some other scriptures in Colossians, in the Bible, and it's in Ephesians, it's in Colossians, it talks about the bond servants. And there's lots of talk in the Bible about kind of slaves and bond servants and stuff like that. And I think for me, when I'm reading that, it's a bond servant has a master. I have a line manager. I have a boss. And so it's like in Colossians and Ephesians 6, it talks about working as if you're working for Christ, as if Jesus is your line manager, and you're going into work with that mindset. So yeah, connecting a kind of posture shift with Scripture would be my practical tip. So yeah.
Yeah, that is a great one there, because if you see your line manager's off, you're thinking, oh yeah, I can slack off a bit. But if you remember that, we should do this work as unto the Lord is always there, the Lord is always watching. So that is a great thing to think about. So we're going to go on to questions now. Thank you to the media team. So we've got a QR code on the screens. If you could scan the QR code and put in your questions in there, and then we will be asking a couple of those to the panelists in a couple of minutes. So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes. Feel free to talk amongst your tables as well and see what questions you want to come up with. I want to get through as many of them as possible. And of course, if everyone could also upvote any questions you want to definitely hear. Okay, so first question, I'm going to throw it out to anybody in the panel. How do you handle gossip in the workplace?
Schools are full of gossip. I found myself, when I started in my current school, with a new head teacher who joined us, and I got on really well with this lady. She was really, really good. But the school wasn't perfect. And so she would make some mistakes, as everybody does, and some things weren't good and other things were good. But there was very quickly, it was obvious to me that there was an awful lot of chat that was going on that was pretty unhealthy, and not helping the school and not helping the head teacher and not helping the management. And so my sense at times that working in that environment was just to all consistently not get involved. And so whenever something negative was said, then I made a point of not necessarily engaging with it or chatting, but just turning it and starting talking about something positive that was taking place. And so I did that for a long time, and you ended up with a situation where there's the people that worked with me in my department, none of them were going to get involved in this, because the minute they raised anything, we were turning it into a positive. And they weren't negative people anyway. I was very fortunate at that point, the people that I worked with. So I certainly have seen that, and just making sure that I am not getting involved in it. I would have to be honest, the longer I've been in school, you can drift a wee bit, and I found myself maybe over the last 5-6 years at times I've got involved in a conversation, and then I've walked away thinking I didn't used to engage. What's going on here? And I'm saying to myself, like, get back to that place, which is the much better, healthy place to be. So it's just to be positive and see the good, and try and turn conversations into a more kind of healthy way.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. There's two elements there that you mentioned. So there's obviously not engaging in that, but also then turning it into a positive. That is a great practical thing we could do there. I've got another question here from Pete. And Pete says, have you ever offered to pray for a colleague who is facing a challenging situation? And then I guess maybe on that as well, if they respond positively, maybe what would you say? And then if they respond maybe negatively, what would you say then? Because that could be something that comes up.
So I fall short big time in this department of offering prayer in the little, like, so in my work, I'm very desk-based, so it's like the work that you do is on a call or writing reports at a laptop. So, and everybody comes into work and is in that headspace. So the opportunities to pray are in the kind of side conversations, quite short moments. In our office, it's very open, kind of spaced out. But on Fridays, nobody's in the office except for like a very few people. So it's one thing I enjoy about going into the office on a Friday, is you can chat a lot easier, and you can share about the gospel or offer to pray. For me, in an easier way, because there's less kind of ears, less people watching, overhearing. That's very much my kind of timidity. We were talking in the previous session about that. But this one time on a Teams call, I'd heard that this lady she was recovering from a stroke, and she had accredited her recovery journey to her daughter's church, putting her kind of stroke recovery on a prayer list. So that kind of is like, and I guess an encouragement for everybody, if you hear these little nuggets of like, maybe they're Christian, or maybe they're interested in praying or open to that kind of stuff, like put that in your like front pocket and like make note of that. And on a Teams call, we were chatting about some work, and at the end of it, it was like this big hurdle in my mind. It was like, pray for her. It's like, I don't want to. But then decided to go for it, and there's so many times I've not gone for it, but this time it was a really cool moment, and she's actually come and joined a prayer meeting that we have as in our company now. So building those little connections through moments of prayer was a really cool thing. And there's been a few other stories, but I'd like to be better at that and have some more stories. But I imagine you've got some pretty cool stories.
Well, it's actually one that happened this year, and so as part of my PhD, I've got 3 supervisors, and one of my supervisors' husband really suddenly died this year, like totally out of the blue, and the first thing is, I remember when we kind of got the email saying, look, this has obviously happened, and, if you want to send an email, she'll kind of have her eyes peeled for it, but, there you go. And I remember typing the email just saying, like, I'm absolutely devastated. We actually knew her husband, we worked with her husband, so we were all sort of going through this, and I remember typing just, thank you so much for letting us know if there's anything we can do, da-da-da-da. And I remember, like, hovering over this line of, like, and I'll be praying for you. And I was doing that thing where I was like, no, delete. No, I will be praying for you. Delete. And I was kind of poring over this one email of this one line, thinking, why am I struggling so much to either write that I'm praying for you or I'm not praying for you? Like, this is just ridiculous. And then I remember, as I was typing this email, not really sure what to say, because I was also like, this is a huge life-changing moment, and I don't want anything I say to impact either way. As I was considering whether or not to say I was praying for her, another email popped in the chain of all the people, and it was one of my colleagues saying, I'll be praying for you. And I thought, pathetic, Laura, I'm struggling to write it, and here it is. But that prompted me to go, actually, no, I do want to say that I'm praying for you, because I am praying for you. And weeks later when we're having our catch-ups again after the funeral, after everything, she said, I really felt supported by everyone supporting me in their own ways. And, thank you for everything, including your prayers. And so I think that to me, just say it and be bold. And, I don't think anyone is going to be hurt by you praying for them because it's supporting in your way. And yeah, it was good for that colleague to put that email in the chain, and it just, helped me be bold as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sending that. I definitely have experienced that as well. I'm like, I don't know whether to write this or not, and it's okay to write those things as well. A lot of the questions that you have, a lot of the things you've said have answered some of the questions we have here. I've got this interesting question. It says, we live in an age of identity politics where people are assumed to be certain things for being quote-unquote Christian. How do you deal with those negative, the question's gone. How do you deal with those negative perceptions? Or maybe if you haven't felt those, how could someone deal with that? It's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a big challenge for Christians in the workplace, navigating the kind of cultural definitions of identity and cultural kind of pressures on how what's right and what's wrong, and when that clashes with Christian values, that positions a very interesting dynamic in the workplace. Like what Pastor Brian, I'm not sure if he's here, but what he was talking about, it's like Daniel, he was like, I don't know what to do. And I find that incredibly difficult. I don't have an answer for that. But it's a huge thing, and I think Christian values don't always need to be kind of spoken. I think a lot of preaching the gospel is using words, and we can't preach the gospel without using words. But a lot of it is kind of lived out in our actions and our responses. And I think when Christians stand for what they believe in their actions and responses, that gets noticed a whole lot more than I think we often give ourselves credit for. We can quite often beat ourselves up of but I think there's a whole lot more that goes on that we don't see just with our responses and our actions. But I find that an incredibly difficult thing, the kind of identity narratives at play at work, and so yeah.
Thank you for that. Oh, do you want to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just conscious again, working in a school. Identity politics is a big issue, and there's all sorts of things that take place and discussions that might well happen, and certainly the church, what I see from pretty much everybody in the community will send their children through our school, so you see the whole community coming through the school, and then you meet the parents and the grandparents, so you're engaged with the whole community. And the reality is, when I listen to teenagers talking, there is a stereotype of Christians that is very unhelpful, and it tends to be judgmental, critical of other people, feeling that they are better than others, this kind of stuff. And it just leaves me feeling in despair, because that's not the kind of message that I get taught in the church. And when I'm reading the Gospels, that's not what I see, but that's the perception, and it's an issue, I'm teaching higher RMPS at the moment, and as part of that, we're looking at moral issues, and you compare the Christian moral issues to the non-Christian humanist or philosophical approaches and whatever, and they engage the kids. And part of that course, you look at the key principles that sit in the Bible. So I'm teaching the young people, right, here's the key principles. And I don't teach them Christians are judgmental. It's not a key principle of the Bible. So you're teaching them key principles: forgiveness, acceptance of the downcast and the poor and the sinners. Thinking about, particularly the poor, that's everywhere in the Bible. So when you're looking at a Christian response to how you treat prisoners, or some issue in the world, well, where's the how does that fit in the mind of a Christian who has been taught to look out for the poor, that kind of thing? So, I feel that's a very important job that I've got, is to try and get that reality over, but bearing in mind that we're all Christians and we've all got to live a certain way, and we've just got to be aware that that's the perception people have of us, and they have that perception for a reason. So we need to ask ourselves, how do we live in a life in a way that doesn't add to that?
Exactly.
Would I be able to add a few just really quick things?
Something very brief.
I think that there's a scripture that comes to mind of being wise as serpents, innocent as doves, choosing your battles, choosing your moments, when to be very vocal and to challenge, and when not to. And this is kind of off the shelf, like this is the right thing that we should all be doing, but it's incredibly difficult. But that wise as serpents, innocent as doves, and choosing your battles. And like seeking to really understand there's people who have been hurt behind all of these kind of perspectives, and Jesus really cared about those hearts. And
yeah, wise as serpents, that's so true. And when we lack wisdom, the Bible says, we ask and God can give it to us. So that is so important in this. Well, we are at time. I feel like this conversation could go on for hours. There are still some questions, but the panelists will also be around if you have specific questions to ask them. But I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on this panel. It's been very, very edifying. If you could give all our panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much.